Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look, of course, at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mail's consultant editor, Andrew Pearce, and the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire. Very good evening to you. Well, let's see what's on some of those front pages. And, of course, we know what it will be, but different treatments in all the papers. The long goodbye reads the front of the eye as the Queen is pictured lying in state in Westminster. The Metro also shows a poignant picture of the Queen's coffin with the headline, "Our Jewel, Her Crown." The Prince and Princess of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are pictured on the front of the Mirror alongside the headline, "Pride and the Pain," as the Queen's family mourns. "We share your pain," reads the front of the Sun alongside this similar picture of the couples. "Shoulder to shoulder," reads the front of the Daily Star. And the front of the Guardian shows the King following the coffin of the Queen as it is carried into Westminster. The front of the Times pictures other members of the Queen's family with the headline, "A Nation Pays Its Respects." And the Daily Express shows queues of people waiting to pay their respects to Her Majesty with their headline, "Your nation stands with you, ma'am." "Nations turn to say farewell," reads the front of the Daily Telegraph. "She lies at peace as her people bid solemn farewells," reads the front of the Daily Mail. And the Financial Times also pictures the Queen's final resting place in Westminster, but its headline looks at the Chancellor's plans to scrap Britain's cap on bankers' bonuses. And just to remind you, by scanning the QR code you'll see on the screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages of the papers while you watch us discussing them. Well, as I say, we're joined tonight by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's consultant editor, Andrew Pearce. And we are going to dive straight in. Remarkable pictures on all of them, aren't they? Let's look first of all, gentlemen, at the Express. "Your nation stands with you, ma'am," and that just lovely picture inside Westminster Hall.
It's fabulous. It's historic Westminster Hall, the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster. The ceremony, the procession today, powerful and moving. I was in Hyde Park and I was watching it with hundreds of people on a giant screen. It was incredibly moving. Impossible for me, as a devout monarchist, not to find it so moving. I was crying, and I was with a member of the House of Lords. He was crying too. And this headline, I think, sums it up, because the royal family have now given her back, the Queen, to the country, to the people, and the people can now pay their respects and tribute to the Queen by filing into the Palace of Westminster. I'd love to be able to say I could do it, but the queue is already 2.5 miles long, and it's going to be...
And getting longer.
And getting longer.
It's a fantastic use of the picture by the Daily Express. I think it's a very, very good front page. It's in the same group as the Daily Mirror, same owners, but I don't normally like the Daily Express front pages, but I think that's done really, really well, because, of course, it has the Queen there in a coffin, it has the guard, and then it has the public, the people filing down either side. And that's the oldest part of Parliament, 900 years old. And she addressed both Houses of Parliament in there 5 times. And there are little plaques not far from where she now lies, commemorating those addresses.
And it is that point, Kevin, that Andrew's making, isn't it, that there's been a kind of junction today in the process. Last night, when the Queen was brought home to Buckingham Palace, and then we weren't seeing inside. The coffin rested in the bow room. That was for the family. Yeah. And then this transition today at 2:22 precisely, when the procession started, that's when the state took over.
Yeah. And then they filed away. They left her. They left her in the hands of the people. There she's going to be till, what is it, 6:20 or something on Monday morning, till the day of the funeral.
They've had a long time to plan this, of course, but it's absolutely meticulous. No expense spared in the production. And if you're a news editor, TV, radio, newspaper, you would think there's almost a big development, a picture, a moment each day. It's incredible how they've followed this through.
But this is international. This is dominating front pages all around the world. There's talk that the TV audience for the funeral will be the biggest in history. Some to be talking of 4 billion.
Well, there's no doubt, and I'm not a monarchist, but the world will effectively come to London on Monday to be at Westminster Abbey from Joe Biden down. It's jostling for invitations. It's stopping people coming.
Well, a lot of them are here now in those queues as well. Let's have a look at another of these pictures. A different angle on Westminster Hall in the eye, the long goodbye. And as you're saying, it's 4 days, 24 hours a day of lying in state.
Yeah, which is a long period, but I don't think there's going to be any gaps in that queue. I was wandering along near Southwark Bridge earlier on, and there's a kind of community spirit there, almost carnival at times, and that's no disrespect meant by the people in it. Some of them will be arch monikers, some will be going along just because it's become an event. They're curious. There were some tourists too, but it's there. It's not going to shorten.
It's also how people are reacting. Sometimes they're clapping,
yeah,
and other times they're not. It's silent, it's respectful, and they're clapping, and the clapping is very nicely done, and it almost as if they know when to clap and when not to. And I find that makes it even more moving and powerful.
And what do you make of the motivation of people going, Andrew? I mean, we reporting on there, and some people in the crowd, there's a woman taking a tiny baby along, and that is for posterity, isn't it?
It is.
So as you can get that photograph of the child that in 20, 30, 40 years' time, you can say, look at you then.
Yeah, you were at the most historic, significant funeral probably since Winston Churchill, more significant than Winston Churchill's, I would argue. It's the first state funeral since Churchill in 1965. The most famous woman in the world, the most enduring monarch in the world. There's never going to be a British monarch who will get to a platinum jubilee, and you were there as a child. My mum and dad, you know, were outside Buckingham Palace. They slept outside Buckingham Palace for the coronation. My mum was already pregnant with her first child, my sister, because they wanted to be part of this.
And you grew up as a family with those pictures then,
absolutely.
Did you? Yeah.
And they saw a flash of the coronation carriage. They still remember the Queen of Tonga, who had the carriage open, and it was pouring with rain, and there was a little man in the carriage in front of her, and somebody said, "Who's the man in the in the carriage with her?" And what's his name? The great playwright said, "It's her lunch." I mean, it was just an extraordinary day. And Mum and Dad said they would never have missed it for anything, even though they hardly saw anything of the Queen.
I grew up in a household with a different tradition to that on royal issues. Look, Diana was a huge event at the time. It was
a shock. I mean, that was the difference, isn't it?
But if you gauge it on newspaper sales after a big event, the rise in newspaper sales have been bigger with the Queen than they were with Diana. And you're right, it was a shock. In one way, 96-year-old woman who we know has been in poor health dies is not a shock in itself, although the timing.
It does feel like a shock, I'm afraid.
Well, it is. I mean, the reality.
We thought she'd go on forever.
Yeah.
It wasn't it? Charles said, or was it Boris said in his speech? We thought she'd go on for eternity. We thought she'd go on and on. We do not know any difference.
It's emotional, isn't it? Because there are other events in people's lives that have much bigger impact, like a general election, the Brexit vote, joining the European Union. There are a lot of events that will have far more impact on how we live our lives. But she was there. And people were very fond of her and respected her. And if you're
around the world, and that's the point.
If you're King Charles III, as he is now, and Queen is dead, long live the King, you will be concerned that some of the hereditary monarchy has died with her. And we are seeing a moment that will not be repeated in 20, 25 years, whenever.
No, never again.
There's a change again. I will predict and hope to be alive that there will not be a response like this.
And to that end, to your point, Kevin, I suspect a lot of these front pages, a lot of these papers with these remarkable pictures, and of course, plenty more to come, most notably on Monday for the state funeral, these have been squirred away by people.
Yeah.
Yes,
souvenir collectors'
absolutely,
items.
Copies.
So many. Kevin and I were speaking at an event this morning, and the woman on the stage with us said, "I bought every single newspaper the day after the Queen died, and I'm keeping them forever. And we've got lots at home, the Times, the Telegraph, the Mail, because I want to keep them."
Wrap them in plastic. Let's have a look then at another of these. This is a close-up in the Metro, a close-up of that procession from Buckingham Palace. Long, slow, down the Mall, through Horse Guards, along Whitehall, through into the Houses of Parliament, and then ultimately to Westminster Hall. I mean, what did you make of that, with echoes again of Diana's funeral, with the royals walking slowly behind.
And William and Harry, we know there's the problems in that relationship, which I don't sense have been fixed this week.
Yeah.
But they are recreating that walk which they did with their mother. What was William? 11? Harry was 11. William was 14 or something.
It was very, very different. It felt cruel back in '97 that you had two young boys being required to walk behind the funeral cortege of their mother. Now they're older, and it's their grandmother and the grandmother's children, Charles, Edward, Andrew, Anne. They're all adults, so it feels very different.
Yeah,
very different.
And it's a clever headline, isn't it? Our jewel, her crown.
Yeah.
Very clever. Very clever again. The Metro do so many clever front pages.
Yes, with the crown front and centre.
Yeah.
But on the royals behind, I mean, it was noted, wasn't it, that Andrew and Harry, having both served in war zones, were not in military uniform.
And there's going to be an exception made for Prince Andrew on Sunday night when they do the Prince's...
The vigil.
The vigil. So he's going to be able to wear a uniform, but Harry won't. Harry, of course, did two tours of active service in Afghanistan. Yeah. Andrew was in the Falklands and he could have died, but they are not working royals, so that's the
Them's the rules.
Them's the rules, and they're making an exception for Andrew because it is his mother.
But, why don't they wear the uniforms of the ranks they had, rather than you look like Charles is a field marshal. He's never been a field marshal. It's kind of an honorary title. I suppose now he's commander-in-chief.
Yeah, and of course Prince Edward was in the Royal Marines for 12 weeks until he legged it because he didn't like it. And he's wearing the full regalia.
But Harry did 2 tours in Afghanistan.
But this was his
Andrew
decision.
was in the Falklands. Whatever else I think about him,
he was in combat.
But this was Harry's decision to walk away from his duties, and he knew when he walked away from his duties, he lost all his honorary roles with the military.
Presumably, they don't wear the uniforms of the ranks they held when they actually served, because they'd be so junior to the others who have a lot of braid and swords.
They'd have been colonel-in-chief of this, that and the other regiments. That's his Princess Anne.
Let's have another look at one of these, the headlines. And it's the pictures, though, that do jump out. The Daily Telegraph, nation's turn to say farewell, that point that we've been making this evening. I want to focus, though, on the photograph and, your thoughts about those young men, the bearer party, the precision with which they carried the coffin in Westminster Hall.
And you can see not only you can see how young they are because of their faces. None of them are wearing medals, which means they've not got any long service medals. And that was the same when they were in the last time we saw them with the Queen. And they did it brilliantly. I mean, one of them was sweating profusely. Wouldn't you be sweating profusely? It's a very heavy 30.
Well, I mean, that was from wearing the hat.
But that coffin
was taken
the
from.
the Queen was tiny, but that coffin is oak and heavy.
Because they rehearse with the correct weight. I don't know what they put in for the rehearsals. A bit grim to think of it, but they are so well drilled. And they're just brilliant on what they do, because you are worried that there's going to be a slip and there's going to be a catastrophe and they'd never live it down, but they don't. Time after time after time.
We were saying
they just perform it brilliantly.
It's not just their mum and dads are watching, their grandpas are watching, the whole world is watching them and marvelling. And they're a magnificent advertisement for the British Armed Forces.
Yeah,
they really are.
And just continuing, I mean, it's just so interesting looking at the pictures. Then behind that, we wondered where the women were, apart from the Princess Royal, who was walking, of course, behind the coffin, and we can see her there just behind the King. But then lined up there they all were, the Queen Consort and all the other wives
and
of
the
the
lineup
men.
is interesting because Prince William is now he's now the Prince of Wales and he's heir to the throne, but he's not behind his father. He's behind the older royals, so he's behind the Queen's children. Quite interesting in the lineup because they're taking centre stage, which I thought was quite interesting. And Tim Lawrence, Princess Anne's husband, who is a Rear Admiral, who's been everywhere in this funeral.
He's been with the Princess Royal all the way with the
whole way through, because he was clearly very close to the Queen, and they're just about to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary.
But it is one of those photographs you look and you see something else, something new every time if you study it. I don't know who the guy is on the stairs there saluting. I don't know who he is. I'm sure he's very important in protocol terms.
Paging Alistair Bruce.
And also some of the women in black at the side are the Queen's ladies in waiting. So people like Lady Susan Hussey, who'd been with the Queen for decades. Real blow for her, because she's been almost like a sister to the Queen. And I imagine Angela Kelly, I would imagine, who is the Queen's dresser. I'm sure she's in that group.
The way the children line up first, and then you get the grandchildren after it. Yeah, there is protocol. It's a state occasion. It's very public, but it's also very personal.
And it's the
and
fact
there is a family.
there wasn't a step out of place, was there, by anyone? Everyone knew their place. Everyone glided into position.
And they left at 2:22 from the palace, and they got exactly the time they were. You could set your clock to the second. Extraordinary. The music was haunting. Big Ben chiming. Oh, my God. So powerful.
Got another photograph in the mirror, front of the mirror. It's a pretty similar one on the front of the Sun as well.
Well,
and
I think
there's a lot to read into this picture. And I think the Mirror have got the headline just right. The pride and the pain. Well, let's look through them. I mean, there's an inset there of the King. But the Prince and Princess of Wales first.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the biting of lips.
You can see the distress on both of them. Prince Charles has looked distressed the whole time we've seen him. I mean, not least when he made that remarkably powerful emotional address to the nation. And you can see it again, he's struggling to hold his emotions. Harry and Meghan at the back, pride and the pain. So you could read this headline a couple of ways. The pride, they're proud of the Queen, and we're proud of the Prince of Wales and Princess of Wales, and the pain of Prince Charles. Or is the pain referring to Harry and Meghan? Because they have been a pain.
Well,
They've been a big pain to the royal family.
You may say
but there's the rift between the...
And that's caused pain.
The brothers, then there's the rift between the wives, and there's a rift with Harry and Meghan, who are accusing the royal family of at least one of them being racist. We never quite discovered one, and then denying their son a title of a prince because somehow because of his colour. I mean, there's a book coming out by Harry soon.
Well, we know not when. But quite clearly that is all put aside. For this occasion.
They'll be united in the grief over losing their grandmother.
That is a deliberately ambiguous headline in the Mirror, and I think it's clever and it's thought-provoking.
Just look at...
and the Sun's is similar.
Just look at the group of four. Well, we don't get this in the Sun, but the Duke and Duchess of Sussex gripping each other, holding hands tightly.
She's probably very nervous because she's not used to this at all. I mean, Kate's been a part of the royal family now for a very long time. I can't remember how long they've been married. It's 10 or 11 years. So this is all still new to her, and Harry is supporting her.
You look at Harry's face there, I'd love to know what he's thinking. I mean, that is a man lost in thought.
Well, he's been...
Well, that's... I mean, that is the look of someone holding it together, in actual fact, isn't it?
Amazing.
Yeah, and he was incredibly close to the Queen, but he spent, in the last 2 or 3 years living in America, he's hardly seen her. Lilibet got to see the Queen just once. He'll be going through all sorts of emotions.
Well, he'll have some regrets, won't he? I mean, you just apply what you would do in your family to their family. I mean, they're kind of put on a pedestal, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, they are a family.
And it's just one last point on this picture. It is the Prince of Wales then looking away, not quite at the camera, just to the left of the camera, but just looking this way. That's the pain as well.
Yeah. In the past, his father, has been a bit miffed whenever his sons have stolen the limelight on the front of newspapers and the pictures. But that is the picture. I think that is the picture.
And he is the next generation. He'll be king himself one day, and again, him and Catherine haven't put a foot wrong, have they? I mean, she is the great star, I think, of the royal family. Catherine Middleton, the Princess of Wales.
Princess of Wales. Last quick one on the Financial Times. Well, really twin headlines. I suppose you'd expect it. It's quite an explosive story. They've got the Chancellor to end cap on bankers' bonuses. Maybe we'll get to discuss that more in the next hour. But top of the paper, royal family escorts Queen in procession to Westminster.
I think the FT has had a picture of the funeral of the Queen every single day on the front page, and a story on the front page, because their readers are interested too.
Most of the royal stories in the FT have been a single paragraph on the front and no more.
Yeah, but that's a very powerful picture again. And again, you see the King, you see the four key members of the royal family.
But just a quick thought then, Kevin, on Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, set to end the cap on bankers' bonuses.
Well, I'll be very unpopular, but it's going to be a government, small state, cut taxes, it says, and deregulation. But I think people at the moment want a big state that'll protect them and serve them. And do bankers really deserve more bonuses?
Well, I'll make a controversial point of that. If you give them bigger bonuses at 47% tax rate, which presumably they're on, well, we get nearly half of
We will.
for the Exchequer.
Yeah,
I think
we will.
you'll find you'll get more money by just taking the bonuses. I'm not into the Laffer curve. I'm not into the Laffer curve.
But the banks keep it, don't they?
Yeah.
Listen, he wants to make the city a key place. He wants to keep its place as one of the main city economies in the world, and bankers' bonuses are a key part of that. If they earn it, they earn it.
What he wants is to give a bung to the people who finance the Tory party.
The bankers.
That's what he did. The Tory party is the political wing of
Which
finance.
Which banker is a big Tory donor? Tell me which one.
If you look at the Tory donors, you will see financier after financier after
just going to
financier. Quite a few of them
the television
are in the
with
House of Lords.
unsubstantiated
As you know.
allegations?
We are
It's
going to
funded
pause
by
that there
the
because
finance industry.
political hostilities, as we've seen, have ceased in Parliament for this period of mourning. They'll cease here in the Sky News studio as well.